the man said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You're making a mistake, a career-ending mistake." The officer just laughed, shoving the suspect's head down against the cold metal of the patrol car. He thought he had caught a thug. He thought he had caught a break-in artist lurking in an upscale neighborhood. He didn't look at the badge in the man's pocket. He didn't check the plates on the sedan. Moments later, the radio didn't chirp with a dispatch code. It screamed with a voice that made the blood freeze in the officer's veins. This wasn't just an arrest. It was the moment the hunter realized he had just handcuffed the wolf. Stay tuned, because when the karma hits, it hits like a freight train. The rain in Oak Haven wasn't the kind that washed things clean, it was the kind that made the grime stick. The sky hung bruised and heavy as dusk settled over the well-manicured lawns of the North District. Special Agent Elias Grant sat in the driver's seat of a charcoal-gray Chevy Malibu, the engine off to conserve fuel and keep his profile low. He wasn't in one of the Bureau's flashier SUVs. He was deep in the gray zone of an undercover operation, blending into the background where people rarely looked. Elias adjusted the heat vent, though it wasn't blowing. He had the build of a man who spent his mornings boxing and his evenings reading case files. His skin was dark, his eyes sharp and analytical, currently fixed on the colonial-style house across the street at 420 Elm, the home of Councilman Victor Lang. Lang wasn't just a local politician. He was the suspected linchpin in a massive money laundering operation moving through the state's construction contracts. Elias had been building this RICO case for a long stretch. He wasn't here to arrest Lang. Not yet. He was here to see who visited him before the city budget vote. Elias took a sip of lukewarm coffee from a thermos. "Come on, Victor," he whispered to the silence of the car. "Make the call." He was dressed for comfort, not for a press conference, a heavy navy hoodie, dark jeans, and sturdy boots. To the casual observer, he didn't look like the assistant special agent in charge of the Chicago field office. To the untrained eye, he looked like a suspicious man sitting in a car in a neighborhood where the average income hovered well above average. And unfortunately for Elias, Officer Bryce Kane had a very untrained eye. A cruiser rolled past slowly. Elias saw it in his rearview mirror. Unit 4 Alpha, Oak Haven PD. He didn't flinch. He didn't duck. He just kept his eyes on the councilman's house. Federal Protocol 101, don't act guilty and you won't look guilty. But the cruiser didn't keep going. It braked hard. The reverse lights flared white in the gloom. Elias sighed, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just a fraction. "Don't do it," he muttered. "Just keep driving, officer. You have no idea what you're walking into." The cruiser backed up until it was parallel with Elias's hood. Then the blinding takedown lights flicked on, flooding the interior of the Malibu with harsh white illumination. Elias squinted, shielding his eyes with one hand. He knew the drill. He reached slowly toward the passenger seat where his credentials lay hidden under a newspaper. "Keep your hands where I can see them," the voice boomed over the cruiser's PA system. Elias froze. He slowly placed both hands on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. He was a professional. He knew that any sudden movement could be interpreted as a threat, especially by a nervous local cop. He watched in the side mirror as two officers emerged. The driver was a big man, broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of guy who spent too much time bench pressing and not enough time de-escalating. That was Officer Bryce Kane. His reputation preceded him. Elias had read the local precinct reports as part of his recon. Kane had multiple excessive force complaints over the years, all dismissed by a friendly internal review board. The passenger was younger, skinnier. Officer Theo Reed, a rookie barely out of the academy, looking like he was trying to grow a mustache that refused to cooperate. Reed looked nervous. Kane looked hungry. Elias rolled down the window as Kane approached, his hand resting heavily on his holstered Glock. "Good evening, officer," Elias said. His voice was deep, steady, and devoid of fear. Kane didn't return the greeting. He shined his flashlight directly into Elias's eyes, blinding him. "License and registration, now!" "It's a rental," Elias said calmly, keeping his hands on the wheel. "My identification is in my jacket pocket, and my federal credentials are on the passenger seat under that paper. I'm going to reach for them slowly." "Don't you reach for a damn thing," Kane snapped. "Out of the car!" "Officer," Elias tried again, channeling the authority he used to command task forces. "I am a federal agent conducting an active surveillance operation. If you force me out of this vehicle, you're compromising a federal investigation." Kane let out a short, barking laugh. He looked back at Reed, who was standing by the rear bumper, hand hovering near his taser. "You hear that, Theo?" Kane sneered. "We got a federal agent here, probably Special Agent Hoodie, right?" He turned back to Elias, his face hardening. "I said get out of the car now or I drag you out." Elias calculated the odds. If he resisted, Kane would tase him or shoot him. If he complied, he blew his cover for the Lang investigation, but he stayed alive. The choice was obvious, but it tasted like bile. I'm complying, Elias said. He unbuckled his seatbelt with slow, deliberate movements. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. He stood taller than Kane. For a second, the power dynamics shifted just by sheer physical presence. Kane didn't like that. Turn around, Kane commanded. Hands on the hood, spread them. Check my credentials, Kane, Elias said, using the officer's name intentionally. They are on the seat, just look at the badge. Shut up! Kane shoved Elias forward, slamming his chest against the wet metal of the rental car. Elias exhaled sharply as the air left his lungs. He felt Kane's hands patting him down aggressively, checking the waistband, the pockets. Kane's hand brushed against the concealed holster at Elias's hip, his service weapon, a Glock 19M. Gun! Kane screamed. He's got a gun! It is a service weapon, Elias shouted, his voice finally rising. I am FBI. But it was too late. The logic had left the building. Kane kicked Elias's legs apart, forcing him down to his knees in the mud. Reed rushed forward, looking terrified. Cuff him now, Kane roared. Elias felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. He didn't fight back. He knew that fighting back was a death sentence. Instead, he engaged a different weapon, his mind. He began to memorize everything. The procedure errors, the lack of probable cause, the specific insults Kane was muttering. You boys have really stepped in it, Elias said, his cheek pressed against the wet asphalt. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I gave you a chance. You have the right to remain silent, Kane spat, yanking Elias up by the handcuffs, sending a searing pain through his shoulders. So use it. As they dragged him toward the cruiser, Elias looked back at the councilman's house. The curtains moved. Councilman Lang was watching. The operation was blown. Elias Grant's eyes went cold. He wasn't just an agent anymore. He was a man who had just lost months of work to a bully with a badge, and now he was going to destroy that bully's career with the precision of a surgeon. The back of a police interceptor is designed to be uncomfortable. It is a hard plastic shell smelling of old sweat, vomit, and industrial cleaner. Elias sat awkwardly, his hands cuffed behind his back, his knees pressed against the cage divider. In the front seat, the atmosphere was electric, but for the wrong reasons. Kane was high on adrenaline, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he merged back onto the main road. Reed, the rookie, was sitting in the passenger seat looking back at Elias through the plexiglass. Kane, Reed said softly, maybe we should have checked that ID. He really didn't act like a perp. Don't be a snowflake, Theo, Kane scoffed, checking his rearview mirror to glare at Elias. Everyone's a lawyer or a fed when they get caught. Guy was sitting outside a councilman's house in a hoodie, probably casing the joint for a robbery. We just saved the neighborhood. Elias leaned forward as much as the cuffs would allow. Officer Reed, is it? Reed jumped slightly. Yeah. Check the computer, Elias said. His voice was calm, muffled slightly by the glass. Run the plate of the Malibu. It's a fleet rental registered to the U.S. General Services Administration. Run my name, Elias Grant. Don't run squat, Kane ordered. We book him as John Doe if he doesn't have ID on him. Let the desk sergeant sort it out. You left my ID in the car, Elias said, which is a violation of procedure. You also left my vehicle unlocked on a public street with a federal firearm inside. That's a felony, Kane. Negligence. Kane slammed on the brakes at a red light, turning around to shout through the grill. You shut your mouth. You're in my world now, pal. You speak when spoken to. You have moments, Elias said. Kane frowned. What? We are about moments from the precinct, Elias analyzed, but my team tracks my vitals via my smartwatch. They know my heart rate just spiked. They know I've stopped moving. They are tracking the GPS of the car. If I don't check in within the next stretch, a distress signal goes out. Moments after that, the cavalry arrives. Elias paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Moments, Kane. That's how long you have to pull over, uncuff me, and pray I don't file charges for assault on a federal officer. Kane laughed, but it sounded forced this time. You watch too many movies. But Reed wasn't laughing. The rookie's hands were shaking as he reached for the onboard laptop. He began typing. What are you doing? Kane snapped. I'm just checking, Reed's voice cracked. If he's lying, we add impersonating an officer to the charges. It strengthens our case. Kane grunted but didn't stop him. The light turned green. The rain hammered against the roof. Elias closed his eyes and began to count the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. In the front seat, the rhythmic clicking of the keyboard was the only sound. Then silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Kane, Reed whispered. What? Kane, pull over. I'm not pulling over. Garrett, pull the car over now, Reed screamed, his voice pitching up into hysteria. Kane swerved slightly, startled by the rookie's outburst. What the hell is your problem? Reed turned the laptop screen toward the driver. Look at the return on the name. Look at the clearance level. It's red flagged, classified, top secret clearance. Kane squinted at the screen. The color drained from his face faster than the rain running down the windshield. The screen didn't look like a normal criminal history check. It was flashing a bright red banner. Federal agent, do not detain. Contact SAC Chicago immediately. Below that was a photo of Elias Grant in a suit, looking stern, and his title, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Organized Crime Division. "Oh no," Kane breathed. "Oh no." "I told you," came the voice from the back seat. Moments left. Kane's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles turned white. "It's fake," he stammered. "It's got to be a hack. People can hack these things." "It's the NCIC database, Garrett," Reed yelled. "You can't hack the NCIC from the back of a cop car. We just arrested the head of the FBI's organized crime unit." "Uncuff him," Kane said, his voice trembling. "We stop. We let him go. We say it was a misunderstanding." "Too late," Elias said. "You already called it in. Dispatch knows you have a suspect. If you let me go now without processing, it's kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. You're already in the quicksand, Kane. Stop struggling. You'll only sink faster." Kane panicked. He did the worst thing possible. He doubled down. "No," Kane said, his eyes wild. "We bring him in. We find something on him. He had a gun. He was threatening us. We stick to the story. It's his word against ours." Reed looked at Kane like he was insane. "Are you crazy? He's the FBI." "He's a suspect," Kane roared. "And we're the police. We run this town, not the feds." Elias shook his head in the darkness. "Moments," he whispered. Suddenly the radio crackled to life, but it wasn't the bored voice of the dispatcher. It was the chief of police, Chief Roy Harlan. "Unit 4 Alpha, this is Chief Harlan. What is your location? Over." Kane grabbed the mic, his hands sweating. Chief, we're southbound on Main, bringing in a 1015, resisting arrest, possession of a concealed weapon." There was a pause on the radio, a pause that lasted an eternity. "4 Alpha," the chief's voice came back, tight and strained. "I have the special agent in charge of the Chicago FBI on my personal line. He says you have one of his men. He says his agent's panic beacon just triggered. Stop the vehicle immediately." Kane dropped the mic. It dangled from the dashboard by its cord, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Elias leaned back against the hard plastic seat and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "Time's up," Elias said. Blue and red lights erupted in front of them. Not one car. 6 unmarked black SUVs swerved across the median, blocking all lanes of traffic. SWAT trucks mounted the curb. The sky above them began to chop with the sound of a low-flying helicopter. Kane slammed on the brakes, sending the cruiser into a skid. They came to a halt, surrounded by a wall of federal steel. "Open the door, Kane," Elias commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "And pray." The intersection looked less like a rainy suburban road and more like a war zone. The air vibrated with the thrum of the helicopter hovering just above the tree line, its spotlight pinning Officer Kane's cruiser to the asphalt like a bug under a microscope. Inside the cruiser, the silence was deafening, broken only by the hyperventilating breaths of rookie officer Theo Reed. "What do we do?" Reed squeaked, his hands hovering uselessly over the dashboard. "Garrett, what do we do?" Officer Bryce Kane didn't answer. He was staring through the rain-slicked windshield at the wall of black SUVs. Doors flew open. Men and women in body armor poured out. They didn't move like patrol cops. They moved with fluid, terrifying precision. They carried carbines, not pistols. On the back of their tactical vests, huge yellow letters spelled out the 3 letters Kane had been praying were a lie. FBI. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker on the lead SUV. It wasn't the polite warning Kane had given Elias. It was a command from authority itself. "Driver of the police vehicle, throw the keys out the window, exit the vehicle walking backwards, hands on your head, do it now." Kane's ego, inflated by years of bullying locals, suddenly punctured. He looked at the rearview mirror. Elias Grant was just watching him. The agent wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was one of profound, exhausted disappointment. "Open the door, Kane," Elias said again. "Don't make them breach. You won't like the breach." Kane's hands shook as he rolled down the window. He tossed the keys. They clattered onto the wet road. He opened the door and stepped out into the blinding lights. "Walk backwards," the voice screamed. Kane complied. He felt the rain soaking his uniform, weighing him down. He felt small. For the first time in his career, he felt exactly how every suspect he'd ever harassed felt. Helpless. Strong hands grabbed him. He was spun around, slammed against the side of his own cruiser, the exact same way he had slammed Elias moments earlier. But these hands were professional. They checked him for weapons efficiently, stripping his Glock, his taser, and his backup piece in seconds. "Officer Bryce Kane?" a voice asked. Kane looked up. Standing in front of him was a man in a trench coat flanked by 2 tactical operators. This was Special Agent in Charge Barrett Knox. He looked like a man who ate gravel for breakfast. "Yes," Kane croaked. "I am a police officer. I was performing a traffic stop." "You are under arrest," Knox interrupted, his voice cutting like a razor. "Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, also obstruction of a federal investigation, assault on a federal officer, and kidnapping." "Kidnapping?" Kane shouted as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. "I arrested a suspect." "You abducted a federal agent," Knox corrected. He leaned in close, his nose inches from Kane's. "You see that man you put in the cage? Knox pointed. Two agents were carefully helping Elias out of the back seat. They didn't handle him like a criminal, they handled him like a brother. One agent was already using a key to unlock the handcuffs. Another was draping a dry jacket over Elias's shoulders. Elias rubbed his wrist, grimacing. He walked over to where Kane was being held. The circle of agents parted to let him through. Elias looked at Kane. He looked at the mud on his own knees. He looked at the rookie Reed, who was crying while being zip-tied by another agent near the trunk. "I told you," Elias said softly. "Moments. You had every chance to stop. You chose the hard way." Kane's face went pale. A wire? The hoodie. The suspicious agent. Elias had been wired for sound to record the councilman. Instead, he had recorded the entire illegal arrest. "Get him out of my sight," Elias waved his hand. "And take the rookie in separately. He wanted to check the ID. He might be salvageable as a witness." "You can't do this," Kane screamed as they dragged him toward a black SUV. "I know the chief. I know the mayor." Elias didn't turn around. He walked to the trunk of the rental car, which the FBI forensics team was already dusting, and retrieved his credentials. He clipped his badge onto his belt. "Barrett," Elias said, looking at the Oak Haven police station down the road. "Change of plans. We aren't going to the field office." "No?" Knox asked. "No," Elias said, his eyes hard. Kane was too confident. He said, "We run this town." He wasn't scared of the consequences. That tells me this isn't an isolated incident. That tells me the rot goes deeper. Elias looked at the flashing lights of the local precinct in the distance. "We're going to the station," Elias declared. "I want to see who comes to bail him out. We're taking over the precinct." The Oak Haven police precinct was usually a quiet place in the evening, but tonight it looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. The lobby was full of suits. FBI agents were seizing computers. A tactical team was guarding the exits. The local cops were standing against the walls looking confused and terrified, their hands hovering near their belts but terrified to touch them. Chief of Police Roy Harlan was sweating through his white shirt. He stood in the middle of the bullpen trying to regain control of his station. "This is unprecedented," Harlan shouted at the swarm of agents. "You cannot just waltz in here and commandeer my station. I want to see a warrant." The double doors swung open. The room went silent. Elias Grant walked in. He was still wearing the muddy jeans and the hoodie, but he walked with the stride of a king. Flanking him were SAC Knox and 4 tactical agents. Elias walked straight up to the chief. He didn't stop until he was in Harlan's personal space. "You want a warrant?" Elias asked. He pulled a folded document from his back pocket and slapped it against the chief's chest. "Seizure authorized by a federal judge moments ago. We are seizing all dash cam footage, all body cam logs, and all arrest records from the last stretch." Chief Harlan looked at Elias, then at the badge on his belt. He swallowed hard. "Agent Grant, Look, Kane is a hothead. We know that. We can handle this internally. There's no need to turn this into a circus." "It's not a circus, Chief," Elias said calmly. It's a crime scene. And right now, this building is the evidence." Elias turned to the holding cells. "Bring me Kane." Moments later, Elias sat in the interrogation room. It was the same room where Kane had intimidated hundreds of suspects. Now Kane was cuffed to the table, staring at the two-way mirror. Elias walked in alone. He carried a plastic cup of water and a thick file folder. He sat down opposite Kane. He didn't speak. He just opened the file and began reading. "Bryce Kane," Elias read aloud. "Decorated officer, 3 commendations for drug bust, multiple complaints for excessive force, and interesting..." Elias looked up. "You own a boat? A Sea Ray?" Kane glared. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It's an expensive boat on a salary that doesn't match, and you paid cash?" Kane shifted in his seat. "I inherited money." "Oh, we checked," Elias said. "Your parents died broke. You have no inheritance, but you do have a very interesting relationship with Councilman Lang's construction crews. We found deposits, small ones under 10 grand so they don't flag the IRS, but lots of them." Elias leaned forward. "The twist wasn't just the arrest, it was the scope. I wasn't at 420 Elm Street to catch the councilman, Kane." Elias lied smoothly. He wanted to see Kane squirm. "We already have the councilman. We have him on racketeering. He flipped days ago." This was a bluff. The councilman hadn't flipped yet, but Kane didn't know that. Kane's eyes went wide. "What?" "Lang gave us a list," Elias continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A list of police officers on his payroll, officers who look the other way when his trucks move through the city, officers who harass his political rivals, officers who arrest suspicious people parked outside his house to keep his meetings secret." Elias slammed his hand on the table. Kane jumped. "You weren't protecting the neighborhood," Elias roared. "You were protecting the operation. You saw a car watching your boss and you tried to scare me off. But you were too stupid to realize I wasn't a rival gang member. You tried to muscle the Federal Bureau of Investigation." "I didn't know," Kane cried, the tough guy facade completely shattering. "Lang told me to keep the street clear on certain nights. That's all. He paid me just to patrol that block. I didn't know about the laundering." Elias sat back, a satisfied smile touching his lips. He glanced at the mirror. He knew Knox was recording. Kane had just confessed to corruption. "Just to patrol that block?" Elias murmured. "You threw your life away for pocket change?" I can help you, Kane pleaded, leaning over the table, rattling the cuffs. I can testify against Lang. I can give you the others. There's more. Sergeant Donovan, Officer Blaine, they're all in on it. Elias stood up. He walked to the door and knocked twice. You'll testify, all right, Elias said, but not for a deal. You'll testify because you have no choice. You're going to federal prison, Kane, for a long stretch. And do you know what happens to dirty cops in federal prison? Elias opened the door. They become very popular. Elias said coldly. He stepped out into the hallway where Chief Harlan was standing with SAC Knox. The chief looked like he was about to faint. Did you get that? Elias asked. Knox held up a digital recorder. Loud and clear, he named Sergeant Donovan and Officer Blaine. We're rounding them up now. Elias turned to the chief. Chief Harlan, it seems your department has a systemic infection. I'm afraid I'm going to have to place you under administrative review until we determine if you knew about Kane's side hustle. I didn't, Harlan protested. I swear. Then you have nothing to worry about, Elias said, walking past him. But right now I have a councilman to visit, and this time I'm not going to sit in the car. Elias walked towards the exit, the sea of FBI agents parting for him. He was tired, his wrists were bruised, and his clothes were muddy. But as he stepped back out into the night rain, he felt lighter. He had gone looking for a white-collar criminal. He had ended up cleaning up a police department. But the night wasn't over. The karma train had one more stop. While Flynn was crying in the interrogation room, the dash cam footage of the arrest was being processed, and Elias knew exactly where it was going to go. The court of public opinion was about to open session. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but the internet moves at the speed of light. While Elias Grant was busy dismantling the corruption ring within the Oak Haven Police Department, the digital world was about to ignite. It wasn't Elias who leaked the footage. He was too disciplined, too by the book. It was rookie officer Theo Reed. In a desperate bid to secure immunity and prove he wasn't like his partner, Reed's attorney had inadvertently allowed the dashcam file to be included in a public records request filed by a local journalist. In the morning, the video titled Oak Haven Cop vs. FBI Agent, The Arrest went live. Within hours, it had millions of views. The video was a perfect storm of outrage. The audio was crisp. Viewers watched in horror as Elias, calm and compliant, was bullied, mocked, and assaulted. They heard Kane's arrogance. They heard the chilling line, "We run this town." But the climax, the moment the screen flashed red with the federal clearance warning and Kane's face crumbled, became the most shared clip on the planet. For Bryce Kane, who had been released on a massive bond pending trial, the real punishment began before he ever stepped foot in a courtroom. He was sitting in his kitchen, staring at a bowl of cereal he couldn't eat when his phone started buzzing. It wasn't a text, it was a deluge. Hundreds of notifications per minute. He opened social media, his name was trending. People from his high school, people he had bullied years ago, strangers from other countries, they were all there. Remember when you gave me a ticket for going 2 over? Karma's coming. You're a tough guy. Not so tough now, are you? Kane threw his phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. He heard a noise outside. He walked to the window and peered through the blinds. There were news vans, multiple ones. A reporter was standing on his lawn, pointing at his front door. "We are live outside the home of the disgraced officer," the reporter was saying. Kane's wife, Amara, walked into the kitchen. She was dressed in a suit, carrying a suitcase. She looked tired. She looked done. "Where are you going?" Kane asked, his voice cracking. "My mother's," Amara said. She didn't look at him. "I can't do this, Bryce. The threats, the shame. I can't go to the grocery store without people spitting on the ground when they see me. I lost my job at the bank this morning. They said I'm a distraction." "You can't leave me," Kane pleaded. "I'm gonna beat this. It was a misunderstanding." Amara stopped at the door. She finally looked at him, and the look was worse than anger. It was pity. "I saw the video, Bryce. You weren't a cop. You were a monster, and you were stupid." She walked out. The door slammed. Kane watched her get into her car, ignoring the reporters shouting questions at her. The hard karma wasn't finished. An hour later, a tow truck backed into his driveway. A large man in coveralls jumped out and started hooking up Kane's prized possession, the Sea Ray boat. Kane ran out the front door, forgetting the reporters. Hey, you can't take that!" The repo man didn't stop. He handed Kane a clipboard. "Bank called the loan, breach of contract. Plus, the IRS put a freeze on your assets about an hour ago, something about undeclared income." The cameras flashed. The reporter shouted, "Officer Kane, do you have a comment on the corruption charges?" "Officer Kane, is it true you were working for Councilman Lang?" Kane stood there in his sweatpants watching his boat, the symbol of his ill-gotten gains, being dragged away. He was alone, his wife was gone, his career was dead, and the entire world was watching him cry. Meanwhile, across town, Elias Grant sat in a quiet diner eating a slice of cherry pie. On the TV above the counter, the news was playing the clip of Kane's arrest. The waitress poured him a refill of coffee. "Can you believe that guy?" she asked, pointing at the screen with the pot, thinking he could bully the FBI. "Glad they got him." Elias smiled, taking a sip. "Yeah, me too." He didn't tell her who he was. He didn't need the fame. He just needed the win. Significant time later, the federal district court was packed to the rafters. This wasn't a local traffic court. This was the big leagues. The room smelled of mahogany and floor wax. The seal of the United States hung high above the judge's bench. Bryce Kane sat at the defense table. He looked years older. His hair was thinning. His skin pasty. He wore a cheap suit that didn't fit right. His good suits had been seized as evidence of purchases made with laundered money. His lawyer was a court-appointed public defender named Attorney Victor Hale. Hale was a decent lawyer, but he looked exhausted. Defending the most hated man in America was not an easy gig. On the other side of the aisle sat the prosecution. Leading the charge was Assistant U.S. Attorney Victor Hale, no relation to the defender. Hale was known as the Hammer, he didn't lose. And sitting next to him in a crisp charcoal suit was Special Agent Elias Grant. The presiding judge was Nora Bennett. She was a legend in the circuit, fair but terrifyingly strict. She tapped her gavel. The court is now in session. United States of America versus Bryce Kane. Charges: deprivation of civil rights, conspiracy to commit racketeering, assault on a federal officer. The trial lasted weeks, but the outcome felt inevitable from day one. The prosecution's case was a masterclass. They didn't just play the video, they dissected it. Elias took the stand. He walked with the same calm authority he had shown on the street. He swore in. "Agent Grant," the prosecutor asked, pacing in front of the jury, "why didn't you identify yourself immediately?" "I attempted to," Elias said. His voice projected clearly to the back of the room. "I stated my credentials were on the seat. I stated the weapon was a service pistol. Officer Kane refused to look. He was not interested in the truth. He was interested in dominance." "And did you feel your life was in danger?" "I did," Elias answered. "Officer Kane's behavior was erratic, aggressive, and violated every standard of police procedure. If I'd moved my hand to retrieve my badge, I believe he would have shot me." The jury, 12 men and women from diverse backgrounds, looked at Kane. Their eyes were cold. Then came the defense. Attorney Victor Hale tried his best. "Officer Kane," Hale said to his client on the stand, "did you know he was an FBI agent?" "No," Kane sobbed, trying to cry, but the tears looked forced. "I was scared. It was a high-crime area. I thought he was reaching for a gun. I just wanted to go home to my family." "And the money?" the prosecutor asked on cross-examination, standing up slowly. "The deposits from Councilman Lang?" That was a loan," Kane stammered. "A loan?" the prosecutor repeated flatly. "A loan that you never paid back, a loan that coincided exactly with the dates you harassed Lang's political opponents." Kane looked at the gallery. He saw Councilman Victor Lang sitting in the back row wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Lang had already been convicted. He was there as a witness against Kane. And here came the twist Elias had orchestrated. The prosecutor called his surprise witness, Councilman Lang himself. Lang took the stand looking bitter. He had cut a deal to shave years off his sentence. And the price of that deal was Bryce Kane. "Mr. Lang," the prosecutor asked, "did you pay Officer Kane to protect the neighborhood?" "No," Lang sneered. "I paid him to be my muscle, but here's the thing." Lang looked directly at Kane, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It wasn't my idea." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Kane looked confused. "Explain," Judge Bennett ordered. "Kane came to me," Lang said, "years ago. He found out about the construction contracts. He didn't arrest me. He blackmailed me. He said for a steady payment he'd keep the cops away. If I didn't pay, he'd raid my job sites." Kane stood up, knocking his chair over. "That's a lie. You're lying." "Sit down, Mr. Kane," the judge roared. Marshals stepped forward, hands on their weapons. "He's the one who ran the ring," Lang shouted over the gavel. "I was just the money. Kane organized the patrol schedules. He recruited the other dirty cops. He was the boss." The courtroom erupted. This was the dagger. Kane wasn't just a pawn. According to Lang, he was a predator who had bitten the hand that fed him. It didn't matter if Lang was telling the whole truth or just spreading the blame. The damage was done. The jury saw Kane not as a bumbling cop, but as a mastermind of corruption. Elias watched Kane unravel. He watched the man hyperventilate, realizing that his victim defense had just been nuked from orbit. The verdict came back in hours. Guilty, 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 count after count. Judge Bennett looked at Kane over her spectacles. The courtroom was silent. "Bryce Kane," she said, "you have disgraced the uniform. You have betrayed the public trust. You treated the law as your personal weapon. You bullied the weak, and when you finally met someone strong, you tried to lie your way out of it." She shuffled her papers. "This court has no sympathy for bullies. For the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law combined with the racketeering charges, I am sentencing you to a significant term in a federal penitentiary." Kane's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing uncontrollably. He was in his 30s. He would be an old man when or if he ever got out. "And," the judge added, "I am recommending you serve this time at a high-security facility." Kane looked up, eyes wide with terror. "Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Elias stood up and buttoned his jacket. He didn't look back at Kane being dragged away by the marshals. He walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. Reporters swarmed him on the steps of the courthouse. Agent Grant, how do you feel? Is justice served? Elias stopped at the microphones. He looked into the cameras. Justice isn't a feeling, Elias said, his voice grave. It's a process. Today the process worked. But let this be a message. The badge isn't a shield to hide behind. It's a burden to carry. If you drop it, don't expect us to pick it up for you. He walked through the crowd toward his car. But the story wasn't quite over. Kane was gone. Lang was gone. But Elias had mentioned the infection in the precinct. And infections, if not treated fully, have a nasty habit of coming back. As Elias got into his car, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Agent Grant, a distorted voice whispered. You got Kane. Good for you. But you didn't get the money. Elias froze. Who is this? Kane had a partner, not a cop, a silent partner. You think the laundered money was just for boats? There's significant money missing, Agent, and you're never going to find it. The line went dead. Elias looked at the phone, then at the courthouse. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. The hard karma had hit Kane, but the game was just beginning. The phone call had ended, but the silence it left behind was louder than a siren. Significant money missing, you're never going to find it. Elias Grant sat in his car, rain drumming on the roof, just like the night it all started. He replayed the distorted voice in his head. It wasn't a gangster's voice. The cadence was too precise. The grammar was too perfect. He pulled up the case file on his secure tablet. He scrolled past Bryce Kane's mugshot, past Councilman Lang's confession, until he reached the financial forensics report. The Bureau had seized the house, the boat, the cars. They had frozen Kane's police pension, but the offshore accounts had been accessed and drained hours ago. Elias tapped the screen. Who had access? Kane was in custody. Lang was in custody. He looked at the personal data section for Bryce Kane. Spouse, Amara Voss. Occupation, Senior Branch Manager, Oak Haven First National Bank. Elias's eyes narrowed. He remembered the scene at the house. Amara walking out with a suitcase. The tears, the pity. I can't do this, Bryce. He had assumed she was leaving a sinking ship. He hadn't considered she might be the one who drilled the hole in the hull. Elias fired up the engine. He didn't call for backup. He didn't call Knox. He dialed the Port Authority. This is Special Agent Grant, he barked. I need a flight manifest check. Private charters departing in the next stretch. Look for the name Amara Voss. There was a pause. The keyboard clacking on the other end was frantic. Agent Grant, we have an Amara Voss listed on a charter to a non-extradition country. Wheels up in minutes from Hangar 4. Stop that plane, Elias commanded. Ground it. National security hold. The private airfield was slick with rain. A sleek Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac, engines whining as they spooled up. Elias's car screeched onto the tarmac, bypassing the security gate with lights flashing. He drifted the sedan to a halt right in front of the jet's nose gear. He stepped out, his badge raised high. The pilot cut the engines. The whine died down to a low moan. The cabin door opened. Amara Voss stood there. She wasn't wearing the frantic, tear-stained face of the abused wife anymore. She was wearing a sharp suit and a look of cold, calculated annoyance. You're interrupting my vacation, Agent Grant, she called down, her voice steady. Elias walked to the bottom of the stairs. The vacation is canceled, Amara, and so is the transfer. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, descending the stairs slowly. I divorced Bryce this morning. I'm a free woman. I have no involvement in his crimes. You didn't just know about the crimes, Elias said, stepping closer. You structured them. Bryce was the muscle. Lang was the face, but you were the bank. Elias pulled out his phone. We traced the IP address of the transfer. It didn't come from a hacker. It came from a tablet registered to your account. You moved significant money while the jury was reading the verdict. You thought everyone would be too busy watching your husband cry to notice the money moving. Amara stopped. The mask slipped just for a second. Bryce is an idiot, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. He thought he was a king because he had a badge. He bullied everyone, me included. For years, I watched his money, I hid his tracks, and I listened to him brag. I earned that money. It's my severance package. It's evidence, Elias corrected, and you just confessed to money laundering and wire fraud. Amara smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. You can't prove I knew the source was illegal. I thought it was consulting fees. Amara, Elias said softly. You worked at a bank. You know the know your customer laws better than I do. And, he pointed to the jet, you chartered a non-extradition flight under a different name. That's flight to avoid prosecution. That's consciousness of guilt. Sirens wailed in the distance. The new local police under new leadership were closing in. Amara looked at the approaching lights, then back at Elias. Her shoulders slumped. The game was over. He's gonna rot in there, isn't he? She asked quietly. Significant term, Elias confirmed. Good, she whispered. She held out her wrists. At least in prison, I won't have to listen to him anymore. Epilogue, the shared fate. Significant time later, a high-security federal prison is a hard place. It is concrete, steel, and noise. Inmate 89402, formerly Officer Bryce Kane, was mopping the floor of the cafeteria. He kept his head down. He had learned quickly that in here he wasn't the hunter, he was the prey. The other inmates knew he was a cop. He had to pay protection money just to keep his teeth. A guard walked by. "Kane, you got mail." Kane dropped the mop. His heart leaped. Maybe it was an appeal. Maybe it was Amara saying she forgave him, that she would wait for him. He took the envelope. It was from the Department of Justice. He tore it open. It wasn't a letter. It was a notification of inmate transfer. Inmate Amara Voss Kane. Location, same facility, female unit. Status, sentenced to a significant term for money laundering. Kane stared at the paper. She hadn't got away. She was here, in the same complex, just across the fence. He walked to the window. Through the layers of chain link and razor wire, he could see the exercise yard of the women's unit. He saw a figure walking alone in a gray jumpsuit. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Amara," he whispered. She stopped. She looked across the yard toward his building. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just turned her back and kept walking. Kane slid down the wall to the floor. The karma hadn't just hit him. It had swallowed his whole world. He had lost his job, his freedom, his money, and his wife. And he had done it all because he was too proud to check an ID. The final scene. Elias Grant stood on the pier in Chicago looking out at the dark water of Lake Michigan. The wind was cold, biting at his face. His phone buzzed. A text from SAC Knox. "Case closed. Kane and wife processed. All assets recovered. City Council is holding a special election. You did good, Elias." Elias put the phone away. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a garbage man who had finished a long shift. He pulled a coin from his pocket, a challenge coin from his old unit. He flipped it into the air, caught it, and shoved it back into his pocket. "Moments," he said to the wind. He turned up his collar and walked back toward the city lights. There were other towns, other corrupt officials, other bullies thinking they ran the world. And Elias Grant was just getting started. And that is the story of how moments of arrogance cost a man his entire life. Officer Kane thought the badge made him a god. He thought he could bully, intimidate, and take whatever he wanted. But he forgot the most important rule of the jungle. There is always a bigger predator. In the end, it wasn't just the FBI that took him down. It was his own ego. He had every chance to stop, every chance to apologize, but he chose the hard way. And karma delivered the bill with interest. What do you think? Did the sentence fit the crime? And was Amara just as guilty as her husband, or was she a victim who broke bad? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, stay safe, stay humble, and always check the ID.